Hi, I'm Hannah.
Hi, I'm Abby.
And this is Spilling Ink,
the Inksville podcast.
We are back for season 3, episode 2.
Yes, the summer season, all about sharing.
Yes, I'm going to blame full fat baby brain because I was just like, episode 2. We've literally only done the intro episode already.
It's alright, it's okay.
Already.
It's a warm day as well, so we're both feeling a bit in the
Yeah,
room, so
summer is well and truly upon us.
finally.
Exactly, yeah, and it definitely is feeling like the time to be getting out there, getting involved in some of the events that are going on in the local area, which is exactly what this season's all about.
Yes, we say as we're recording this before an Inksville session as well, so
Yeah.
we're ready to go and be with our community. And I haven't written anything for this Inksville. Have you got anything to read? Ooh.
I mean, I've got things I could read. But it's delving into the archives. I
Yeah.
can't lie at the moment.
Nothing's fresh for us.
Yeah, but I do always find this time of year very inspiring. I think the later evenings, I love being outside. I love kind of just feeling like I can just be back with nature. I find that very inspiring.
I was gonna say green thumbed, but not green. You're very like in tune with nature, aren't you? Very like you may go for walks and like
it totally dictates my mood and my kind of creativity levels. So
it's valid. Yeah, I finally moved house, as we mentioned last week. So there's a few less boxes this week, which is nice surrounding us. Yeah. And I'm looking forward. I've got a few slams coming up. I don't know if I talked about that last week, but I have a few slams coming up.
Yeah,
and
you do. You've got some things in the diary, haven't you? It's nice.
It's going to be very nice. Shall we, before we get to our wonderful guest, should we have a quick check-in about creative projects?
Yeah.
Yeah, do you want to allude to... Well, should we talk about what the homework was? Creative task, sorry.
Creative task.
Well, the creative task was for last week and how we've done ourselves in keeping up with it.
Yeah, so
I'm
from
looking at you.
the kind of publishing kind of side of things, I was suggesting really that people have a little Google, see where they want to see their work. Are they thinking of going to the top publishers? Are they kind of thinking more middle ground, or are they thinking kind of indie publishers or self-publishing? So just kind of researching what that means more than anything. I would have quite a good idea because I've attended quite a few different like events and things to educate me on that, but I do hope if you did some research on that, it was useful. And then also just looking at what people have open for submissions at the moment.
Yes.
So again, it can be quite tricky because often their theme or their kind of topic is very niche, and maybe you won't have a poem or some work that corresponds with it, but it's always really useful to see what's out there, who's opening submissions soon, and if you just send to everyone and everything, then you will inevitably get that hook. You will. It happens. It feels pretty hopeless, but it will happen at some point. Your work will find its home.
I mean, even me, I had a good look this last week and just figured out sort of what I would like to submit to, and I found a few things that have like a nice long window, which is like till the end of summer and into autumn, that I can actually reasonably get my act together and put some applications in and some poems in.
It's the hardest thing, isn't it, when you find something that's perfect and it's like, but it's midnight tonight, and you're like, no.
Yes, I've done that a few times where I'm like, I don't know why, but I feel like the social media algorithm is against me, and I'll often be like, oh my gosh, that's incredible, what a so-and-so competition, and then I actually look at it and I'm like, it closes tomorrow and I have a deadline at work, or I'm seeing someone tonight and I want to see them. So it's a bit of a trade-off, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yep.
From a performance perspective then?
Yeah, mine was about researching open mics in your local area, which I believe will really nicely tie into our guest today, because I think he did a lot of performing in sort of like open mics and kind of like cabaret sound nights to get started, so that's really interesting. And on the back of that, actually, I don't think I mentioned last week, but also slams. If you're looking to compete, if you want, and you're not into written poetry, there is, opportunity for a lot of poetry slams at the minute. There's a lot of really, really good ones around. And I think slams are really good. Slams for me, they really focus me on getting new stuff written. They really focus me on like honing performing skill and like the quality of my performance, and like making sure that I'm actually storytelling, and like there's a narrative to like what I'm saying, I guess. I really like slams, and also they really open your eyes to like the quality and quantity of different kinds of poetry that's out there.
I'm the polar opposite. They seem like my worst nightmare. I just think the second you put a competitive edge on something, I run in the opposite direction, but it's just different types of people, isn't it?
Different folks,
I cannot stand anything that is competitive. I hate it.
Yeah,
and get instantly intimidated.
Oh no!
But carry on.
Okay, we'll get you in the Inksul slam.
Open mics are fine.
Open mics are fine.
It's
Yeah,
that
you don't want
slam
grading.
element. Yeah, I don't know. I just know for a fact, and this isn't me being kind of self-deprecating, but I just know for a fact that my work just wouldn't do well in a slam setting, and
but
so
it's not slam work.
yeah,
You know what I'm
exactly,
saying?
it isn't. So, but yeah, I do think it will be really interesting speaking to our guest today, because I think they have used open mics as almost like a bit of a ladder, haven't they, to further them in their career.
Oh, yes. Should we talk about them then?
Yeah, go on then.
Should we move on?
Time for the grand reveal.
So, yeah, I mean, we definitely name dropped last week.
Yes.
But for those of us, joining us now, this week's guest is a lovely chap called Bróccán Tyzack-Carlin, who me and Hannah have known for a few years now. Hannah through the Inksville Festival, and I've known a few years back since then. And he is just the loveliest, just really lovely chap. We've always had a really good time with him. And when he performed last year, we had a really good experience with people just like coming into the room and just wanting to, being drawn towards him. So shall I read his bio?
Yeah, let's hear more about Bróccán.
Bróccán Tyzack-Carlin is a comedian and poet from Hartlepool. His solo shows Don't Bother and Turtle sold out across the country and enjoyed successful Edinburgh Fringe runs. He won the Saboteur Award for Best Spoken Word Show and has been nominated for Best Spoken Word Performer. At the Greater Manchester Fringe Awards, he has been nominated twice for Best Comedy Show and Best Spoken Word Show. He self-published his debut poetry collection, Tiny Badger, in 2020, which is somewhere on my bookshelves, I believe. And his short story, Cork, was included in Sophie Williams' Tales of the Brave, the Bold and the Beautiful. He is currently developing his first full-length play, Moncunion, thank you, through a Royal Court Theatre writing programme. He's a successful slam poet, having won the Manchester Slam in 2018 and the Huddersfield Literature Festival Slam in 2019. He was a runner-up in the Manchester Champion of Champions Slam and a Hammer and Tongue national finalist in 2019.
So just a short list of successes.
He's just done really well. He's just done really well.
I had no idea that he won the Huddersfield Literature Slam in 2019. Were you up against him, or was that
I
pre
wasn't. But that's how I believe, because I first met Bróccán at Attic Stories in 2019 or 2020, and that's what, because if you win the HLF Slam, you get a slot at Attic Stories. Oh, right. So I believe that's why he was there. Wow. But yeah, he's an absolute gem. We're both really looking forward to it, because he's just a lovely person.
Yeah, and I think as well, I think Bróccán is going to be a really great example of the person you see on the stage and the person you see off the stage. Actually, it's a persona. It's something it's a craft. You have to create this presence, and I think we'll share some footage of Bróccán performing on our socials. But actually, just chatting to him as a person, I think it's going to be really interesting. Just to get an insight as to who is the man off the stage. Which sounds very deep,
nice.
doesn't it?
Should we go say hello then?
Yeah, let's go say hi.
Yeah, let's go find Bróccán. Hello, Bróccán. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hello.
It's lovely to have you with us.
It's lovely being here in my own house. It's
Where you
to
belong.
be digitally with you is great.
Yes. Shall we get started? Like we ask all our guests, for those who are listening and watching who don't know you, please could you introduce yourself and your work?
Yeah, I'm Bróccán Tyzack-Carlin. I am a poet and comedian and spoken word performery person. I'm from Hartlepool, born in Manchester, so have ties. The northeast, I was born in Trafford Hospital, overlooking Old Trafford. So, I mean, I'm a United fan through my dad. And then obviously being from Hartlepool, people accuse me of being a Glory supporter. I was born I was born looking at the stadium. So my work, I guess the most recent big show I did a show called Turtle, which was I write shows which combine spoken word and performance poetry and stand up, and that was a show about self and identity. It was a bit bit political and stuff like that, but was centered around a conspiracy theory that I'd come up with, which was that the rapper Vanilla Ice was a sea turtle. So that's what that show is about. Yeah, so I self-produced that and toured that from the end of 2021, and then filmed it last January. So that was good fun. And then I did some sketch comedy last year as well. So I'm in a sketch duo called Rompers, and we a few work in progress shows, and we're trying to develop a show of that. So that was good fun. So yeah, that's what I've been up to.
Saw you at the Edinburgh Fringe after a really long day, and it was like a really dark, hot room from what I remember. It was fun.
For a room that is that large, it had no business being that warm. Together.
It was toasty.
11 o'clock at night. It was midnight, and it was fucking boiling. It was like a converted church. That show was on too late and was in far too big a room for a show that little to no people wanted to come watch.
But you know what? We had a great time. We trotted around the corner to come see you. It was fun. So enjoyed that.
I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Fab.
Well, we were really lucky to obviously have you. I mean, I met you for the first and only time last year at our festival, didn't it? So Brogan was one of our guests, and you were by far just one of the most, I don't know, what do I want to say here? You drew in such a crowd.
You're
magnetic, that's it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we were just, you were such a pull for, in the entire day. And we had so many people coming in off the street or from the next room in the pub just saying, what is going on in here? And when we're like, oh, it's poetry, they're like, no, it's not. Because like, I'm enjoying it. I'm loving it. And it was just so nice. And I remember, I think your performance really did change people's perception of poetry. And that you can actually have fun with it. You can actually, really, it doesn't have to be this deep, kind of silent
harrowing
room. It can actually be something that is enjoyable, that we can really like be we can laugh, it can be lighthearted. And so I was blown away and captivated by your performance, as were many people in that room. So we kind of wanted to know a little bit about your first performance. So how did that come about? How did it go? What was it as successful as your performances are now?
It was so I was living after graduating university. In university, I was in a comedy troupe, and I started doing comedy writing from there. And then I left and graduated and moved to Manchester, and was working as a teacher assistant, a primary school. And then I just started kind of writing poems on an evening, funny things. I hadn't written poems since I was a kid, and I was like, I want to write some funny stuff. And then was just kind of sending it to my friends and things like that. And they were like, oh, you should perform these. There's performance poetry. I'd never been to one. And then I looked up on Facebook. I was like, Manchester poetry, spoken poetry night that I can do. And there was an open mic in Bury run by Kerry. You know
Yeah.
Kerry. And it was called Just Right Speaks. I just messaged them. I just sent them a message on Facebook. I was like, can I come? Am I allowed? And they were like, yeah, you can come. I was like, is that all right? I was like, I've not done it. I was like, would that be all right? And she was like, yeah, that's absolutely fine. I'd written this weird poem about pigeons, and it sounds like the year 9 random quirky thing, but it was like a meditation on people's perceptions of pigeons and things like that. And I was really genuinely nervous. I was like, I don't know what to do. And I just went, it was in the back room of a pub in Bury, and it was just 15 people, pretty much all poets, sat around. It was almost like a Christmas party, and they all knew each other, and I was the only guy, who just had never been there before. And they're like, oh well, they're we're gonna get someone up now. And they're like, well, there's a new person here, so he'll go first. And I was like, oh, shit. So that's so. So I got up and I was shaking. I was just reading out of this book, but it was just this weird long poem about pigeons that I kind of scrawled at 3 a.m. at some point. And they liked it. It went well, but I don't know. I just sort of wanted to try and make people laugh, and they didn't laugh. They just looked concerned for the most part. The ramblings of a madman, essentially. And then the people who ran the night, Chris and Kerry, they liked it, and they were like, "Do you want to headline the next one?" And I'd never did it, and I don't think they really realised that. And yeah, they were like, "We've got a headline spot in January, coming up. Have you got 25 minutes worth of material?" And I had one poem, and I was like, "Absolutely, yeah." So I just gave myself the month to try and write headline set. So yes, that was the first one, and then the third one was that same night, but doing a much longer set.
Yeah,
amazing.
How was it then, kind of having to pressure write a set? Did that pressure help you or hinder you?
I don't know, because I didn't really know what a set was. So, like, I just wrote poems. So, like, I just kept writing really weird stuff. And then I went to one night in Macclesfield with my friend Mike, who was also kind of like dabbling in poetry. And it was like an open mic, and they'd set up like 2.5 hours for it. But like, there's only like 4 people who actually wanted to perform.
No.
They just kept being like, "Have you got another one?" To like, luckily for me, so we just kept all kind of getting up and taking turns and doing like 10 minutes here and there. So I just tried out like every poem that I'd written over the course of this one night. But yeah, I think having deadlines, having like a specific date wherein like you need to have new material, that's how I operate best. I'll go long swathes of time without writing anything otherwise, and it's like you're doing a new show that is booked in 3 weeks' time. It's like I need to write an hour's worth of stuff to get through that, and then yeah. So I think like pressure works for me personally.
Yeah, no, that's wicked. So like, talking about that, like, how do you, so you saying you don't write a lot of poems as you sort of use what you have basically. How do you put a set together now? So like when we invited you last year, it was a 50-minute slot, half performance, half Q&A, which was really fun, by the way. How did you like pick what poems you wanted? How do you like choose a tone? Like,
it's hard because like you say, I think my stuff is quite different to a lot of people's. So I used to be concerned more so at poetry nights than comedy nights. Like, I'm not going to match the vibe. How can I like match what the vibe of the tone of the day will be? And I realised, which was a good revelation, which was that I can't, because it's going to be like a sharp left or right turn either way. Yeah, so structuring a set, I think like I try to start like a little bit like high energy but like accessible, just to kind of show people that just what we're doing this now. Could please get on board and have fun. Otherwise no one's gonna have a nice time. Yeah, and then try and like filter in the weirder stuff down the line, so like kind of get like an access point, like an entry point which is like fairly accessible, and get people to invest and buy into what you're trying to do, and then you can kind of like get into the more elaborately like strange stuff further down the line. I think that goes with like length of poem as well. Like, I always try and start with like some of the like 3 or 4 shorter ones, which is why I do like the punk limerick. I do like a limerick about Thatcher being dead. And I always start sets with that. It's like, that's to be the first poem because it's a limerick and it's short and it's quite horrible, and is nothing's like as horrible as that.
Yeah, it's all up from here, guys. Don't worry.
Yeah, it's like it's if they're on board with that, then we're on board. If not, they'll be relieved at what comes afterwards. So that's good. It's how it works.
Yeah, that's totally fair. And when you're writing, is it poetry that comes first, or is it comedy? Are they separate? Do you kind of like fit them together? Like, how does it work for you?
I think it depends. It depends on what it is. So like, if I have an idea for a thing, say like, I don't know. I wrote a poem about Matt Lucas recently.
You did.
Because Matt Lucas blocked me on Twitter /X, and I thought that was funny. And I was like, I could do stand-up about that, or like, I was like, that lends itself to being a poem. So like, if something happens, or I think this could be a funny bit, like I maybe will start trying to write a poem about it, and you can just tell if it's gonna work or not. And then if it's like it doesn't work as a poem, you can be like, right, can I structure this as a piece of stand-up without that, and like maybe tie it in somewhere in the set. So I think it depends on what the thing is. I'll often try to write something as a poem and then go and just reverse engineer it to be stand-up, but a lot of the time the poem comes first. We're mixing the two, because like I try to use like poetry as a punchline because of just like the rhythm of it. Like I think it lends itself so naturally. You can build something up like an idea through a poem and kind of ebb and flow and things, and you can use the rhythm and the end of a poem to like punctuate a section of a set. I think that's like such a useful thing to do. I think it's just such an open goal, because then when a poem ends, hopefully people will clap or applaud. Like, it just is the polite thing to do. Whereas like if you do like a poor punchline, in the form of stand-up, then and it just doesn't get a laugh, then there's no obligation for the audience to recognise that you've completed something. So I'll write stand-up from the back of writing a poem and then try and like meld it together as something cohesive that's like punctuated by the end of the poem, which you can put a joke into, which is good fun.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, and I think you touched on something there that really came across when I was watching you last year. I think a lot of your performance is kind of about storytelling. I remember, and it stuck with me, it was all about a T-shirt, and was it something like chocolate dip me in chocolate? What was it?
Yeah, dip me in chocolate and throw me to the lesbians.
Throw me to the lesbians. And that has really like stuck with me for some reason after all this time, because I see those kind of T-shirts everywhere, and I'm like, I know what he means now. But yeah, and I remember thinking actually the way that you deliver the poetry and the comedy, it's such a fine balance. Who's inspired you to do that? Who do you turn to kind of get inspiration?
In terms of like storytelling, like wise, I don't know. I feel like this is such a cliche answer for a man in his 20s who likes comedy and poetry to say like Stuart Lee. But Stuart Lee, his like storytelling method, like he will do a 17-minute long routine about a story from his childhood that isn't true, and at the end he'd be like, no, none of that happened, sort of thing. But he's so engaging, and like there's like elements of poetry to the way it's written, like it's so carefully written and like has that sort of rhythm to it. I always liked that in terms of performance. Yeah, I think he's a good one. Nick Helm as well, in terms of storytelling and like energy, was someone who I really liked as well. I like Nick Helm's stuff. He's less of a poet though. Yeah, I don't know. I'm almost losing the question. So
That's all right. Just who inspires you? Who
in general?
Yeah.
So Tim Key's a big one. I'm not really his style of thing where it's like the short. I don't write short. I write long, too long, far too long, as far as anyone else is concerned.
Narrative epics.
Yeah, that's it. I'm like Virgil. Yeah, like I saw Tim Key's show Mega Date in like 2018, and it was one of the weirdest things I've ever seen. And it had like, I'd been to the Frinzy before, so I'd seen a lot of shows, but it just had no concern for like any illusion of being about anything or like a structure. It would just stop and start with weird shit, and then it was all like interspersed by the short film called Mega Date about someone going on a mega date, like the best date ever, and Tamsin Gregg in it. It was weird, but this show would just stop, and then this short film with Tamsin Gregg would just start for 6 minutes, and then it would end, and then he'd come out and he'd just be like sipping a can of Stella and just talking shit, and it was just one of the best things I'd ever seen. So that sort of like bravery and not. And it obviously it's completely structured. It's say cleverly structured, but like it doesn't have like the artifice of like being cohesively about something, which I think that inspires me. I think I love things that are about nothing. I like writing things that are about nothing, or are about more than you would initially.
Below the surface.
Yeah.
It's so funny. I'm just gonna go back slightly. That the poem that reminds you of Brogan is the T-shirt one, whereas the poem that reminds me of Brogan is the vibrator one, which is one of my favourite poems I've ever heard, because I've never read it, because obviously I've only ever... But how old is that poem? Because I feel like I saw you pre-pandemic. Did you do it... Is it old enough to do pre-pandemic, or have I just amalgamated it in my head?
It is.
It is.
Yeah,
it's an oldie, but it's a goodie. It's really, really good. And it's something that always intrigues me is the fact that you have these really like quite avant-garde stories, but then you really manage to get the crowd on side. And I just wanted to sort of like pick apart, like, because also we saw each other recently at a event in Manchester, and your crowd work always amazes me because you are so aggressive and so noisy.
I'm just so noisy.
And yet you are like it is somehow endearing and it really works. So how do you manage to find that balance? How do you get the crowd on side? How do you know how much to give and when to like pull back?
Yeah, I think like in terms of like audience engagement, I think it goes back to that thing of like get on board. If you just kind of demand that everyone's on board, and I don't know, when I first started out, I was like, I guess like my first like on stage persona, which I think a lot of people do when they're like new to performance or they're trying to be funny, was to be like really quiet and weird, which I still do in bits. Like when I'm like introducing the vibrator poem, for example, or the Dip Me in Chocolate thing, I get like sad and really quiet and like meditative and like mulling over this thing and like on the verge of tears about it, and then we'll like scream. I love to scream.
Sound check for the festival was fun when you were moving the microphone.
Oh god, yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. I think like I used to think that the best way for people to find you funny or engaging was to like alienate them, which is very counterintuitive. But it can work. So people just like, oh, this guy's clearly weird. But then I don't know. I feel like if you try and be affable and just kind of like high energy and like if you try and be like high energy and you're clearly like, you're not going to be like, even if you say something to an audience member and like you're being a bit of a dick, if you've made it clear that like you're not being cynical or like vicious to someone, like you can kind of do whatever you want. Like if you've got a smile on your face and like you're shouting at people to like enjoy your like asking them to like cheer for poetry and things like that and kind of get people like chanting on side and things, you can get away with being like more aggressive to them. You can justify it because like you've got that element of like trust, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
No, I really like that. I just want to go off piece slightly because it's a question I haven't asked you, but I think it's actually something that people would find really interesting. And we'll give you a beat to think about this. Don't feel you have to respond straight away, because I know I would just leap in. I just want to quickly pick your brains on like tips and tricks for like other comedy poets, because we haven't actually asked that, and I thought actually I can think of a few people in our community off my head who would actually really like to know.
Yeah.
I guess maybe just one on like how you got started, like how you'd suggest other people get started in this sort of like comedy poet writing, and then like maybe some tips for like sharing, like finding places to perform.
So I guess like a lot of what I do is like born, like it's not observational comedy. Like the poems aren't like observational comedy, but like they're born out of like, which all things are, I think. Because poems can be like quite surreal and like metaphorical, like by their very nature. When people try to write funny things, they might just try and write things that are like weird and like kind of abstractly surreal in order to be funny. But I think if you can find something that is born out of reality first, that's when and then you can make it weird in the expression and the writing of it. That's the amazing, like the two poems that you guys very kindly have remembered are both like they're real stories. Like they're kind of like if you were doing stand-up and just stand-up, they'd be like anecdotes. But yeah, so those two, like about the t-shirt and the vibrator, were like things that happened to me, or things that like I'd noticed in life, and then thought, what's like the funniest way that you can kind of push this like to the extreme? You can get away with pushing things to an extreme as well, like in a poem, because it allows itself to do that in the form. So just kind of find what the base observation is that you find funny, figure out what length you want and which direction you want to push that in, or like the point of it which is funny that you'd like to exaggerate, and then like find the rhythm of the poem and end it emphatically. Like you can build like rhythm and pace and stuff like that, and then kind of like cut it off and bang, and like that's like can instantly get a laugh. And then also there's the opportunity, like we were saying before, like in the preamble to the poem, you can just put jokes in there, so you can kind of prime people, or you can use that as the setup for the joke. Like introducing the poem is the setup, and then the poem itself, all of it is a punchline, and then there's a punchline like within that as well. That's why I see it when I'm writing.
I love that. That's really, really interesting.
Yeah. And then night, I don't know actually. I don't really. There's a place called Born Lippy in. There's a lot of in Newcastle. yeah, I did it recently, and like it's run by a guy called Donald. He's great. There was Punk and Drublic in Manchester, which is sadly closed. See, I've kind of been a bit of a nomad since COVID, so I don't actually know lots of nights anymore.
That's
But
fair.
away from like specific nights, if you can find sort of mixed discipline nights, which have like a mix of poetry and music and stand up and things like that, I think they're the best ones to go to, because you'll have like if you go to a stand up night all the time, you're like, I'm going to do a poem. Everyone's like, well, I prefer if you fucking didn't. Like, that's, like you've got like a barrier there. You've really got a barrier where you've got an audience who haven't come to listen to a poem. It might be the funniest poem in the world, but you've got to kind of, they have to trust you first in order for you to be able to read them a poem.
Yeah.
With poetry nights, you've got like the inverse problem, which is like a lot of the time it's a lot of really sincere, lovely like poetry or quite intense stuff. Someone might be doing a poem about like something quite intense that's happened to them personally. Then you've got to go up, and everyone's kind of still like reeling and recovering from that. And then you've got to go and you're like, I've got a wacky poem about dogs that I'd like to read you.
Yeah.
But if you go to like one of those mixed discipline nights, like sort of like cabaret vibes, they're great, because like you've got an audience that are receptive to more like spoken word stuff, and that they tend to be quite nice audiences. Like even at those poetry nights, if you do funny stuff, people are probably going to get on board with you. But yeah, but then you'll have stand-up fans in there as well who like it's not weird for them to be hearing a poem at this thing. Do you know what I mean? So like it kind of breaks down all those barriers at once, which is good. Yeah. So yeah, those mixed billy interdisciplinary nights are where to go.
Yeah. I always find that the performers who really manage to nail humour in their sets do stick in people's minds, you know. And in Inkspill at the evenings we do, every now and then, they are quite serious nights, aren't they, really? I think people do share quite personal things, but every now and then we will get somebody who does try to play around with humour, and I think people do love that moment of, it's almost like catharsism, isn't it?
I know what you're thinking of.
We can all just have a minute where it's been quite intense, but we appreciate that poetry, but it's nice to just laugh at and use language to laugh and be light-hearted, isn't it? And then be like, and now back to kind of like the serious stuff. But I think actually there is a real space for poetry being catharsism in terms of being used as a technique to express humour and to laugh, because that's another form of therapy, isn't it? So yeah, I think you've cottoned on to something really special there, because actually I think I can imagine you getting great success from it, because in these nights sometimes that is very welcome. Just that break.
I think as well, like, well, a lot of the time it's called it's performance poetry, isn't it? It's like you like, even people who are doing stuff that isn't directly funny. I don't know. I feel like especially people who are like at a headline level and are doing those longer sets, it is an entertainment for like a facet of it is it's people have come to be entertained or moved in some way. So I think, I don't know. I think there's a bit of a like I see it as like it was like if I'm kind of being like the featured poet on a night, I'm like, people deserve like to be like entertained and to have a fun time, as opposed to just like stress. Like I was just if I was like coming out and trying to, I don't know. That's how I see it. But you can do that. Like you can like move people and entertain people in like lots of ways. You can do that like with you can do that with all sorts of emotions.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's
sorry, no.
I was going to say it's something we sought for in the Inkspill Festival last year, and that's why we chose you, is to make sure that you got to highlight this variety of poetry. And actually, like, we also had Rebecca Kenny as our other spotlight poet, and it was a really beautiful balance, because hers is a lot about like health and like womanhood and like disability and stuff, and you having that like comedy balance, but you do bring some like, it's like wonderful storytelling. So it's just a really like, if we do say so ourselves, a well-balanced programme.
Yeah, I think as well, like, sometimes I think humour is really interesting in that it can lead people into this false sense of entertainment, but actually sometimes it can be a bit of a gut punch, can't it? Sometimes you've kind of been encouraged to laugh along with something, and at the end you're like, shit, that was really deep, actually. And you just have to have a minute of like, I've just unpicked what we've all just been laughing at there, and that's bad. But yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? We can still kind of educate, you can still have that impact.
Yeah, I like my shows. I always wanted to. I thought the two shows that my first show was called Don't Bother, and the second one was called Turtle, and they both followed very similar structures. Maybe not out of laziness. I'm going to say it's my style, but as in, like, they followed, like, they were like intercepted like with weird storytelling, like at random intervals, like kind of like during the show, it just kind of interrupted with. In Turtle, it was diary entries about Vanilla Ice, and then in Don't Bother, it was about this like small boy from Middlesbrough called Neil Armstrong who wanted to go to space, and it was never really explained, but like holistically, that this story, like, it was funny because it just was random, it came out of nowhere, but then holistically the story was meant to be quite nice, and like, but it's supposed to be like surreal and daft and things. But I remember someone came up to me after doing it once. They're like, "Can you send me the Neil Armstrong poem?" And I was like, "Yeah, I can." But they were like, I found that like genuinely like moving. They're like, I was really moved by the Neil Armstrong story, and I was like, "Oh, it's supposed like," and I'd written it as something I thought was quite nice, but was like surreal and weird. But like you say, it kind of, I don't know. You don't know how people are going to receive things. Like, people, it can have an undercurrent of being moving or like faux poignancy, but it might actually hit home for someone. And like similarly, like in Turtle, there was the stuff about Vanilla Ice. There's a section which I used to feel quite, I don't know, like it was about like selfhood and like all these things, and it was about identity, and the conclusion was, why can't Vanilla Ice be a sea turtle if he wants to be? So that was silly, but I really genuinely had written like a page and a half before the silly punchline of like things I just genuinely meant, and it would get laughs, but I actually, this is quite sincere, but under the guise of being like it's complete bullshit. So I think it is, comedy could be a nice vehicle for that sort of thing. I think you can sneak in things sometimes and sneak in some quite lovely things.
Definitely.
We were really intrigued because I know you've performed just up and down the country and in different venues. What is your favourite performance memory? Is there like one performance that sticks in your mind, or for any, what works?
You don't have to say the Inkspill Festival, it's fine.
We know implicitly.
I loved the Inkspill Festival, to be fair, because it was the first poetry, like dedicated poetry thing I'd done in a while, like maybe years, like maybe like 2 years. No, it was about a year. I hadn't done one for. I was lying, but it'd been about a year, and it was such like an eclectic crowd as well, like in terms of like age and the manner of, we kind of had like people, the Huddersfield like punks were there, and then there was just like people who wandered off the bar like next door who were kind of just day drinking.
It was a hot day as well. It was very
warm. It was so nice. And that was the first time. So my partner Rosa and her dad came to that.
My parents loved Rosa's dad.
Oh, that's good.
They had a great time.
They didn't mind. They didn't like Rosa, but as
Rosa's dad,
No, she loved meeting everyone. But yeah, that was a great. That probably was one of my favourites of recent memory. I did Don't Bother the show, because I wrote Don't Bother. Speaking about hard deadlines, I wrote that within 6 months of my first ever gig. So I did that 20-minute thing. Someone saw I was like doing these headline spots, and I was my third ever gig. And they're like, "Oh, I run this like student fringe festival in Nottingham. Can you, like, for external acts as well as the students, they're like, have you got an hour?" And I was like, "Yeah, I've got an hour." Wow. So I just had to write an hour of stuff. But that first time I did that hour, I just had no idea what I was doing. I pulled it out like out of nowhere, and then that was really good fun. And my mum came to that. She like drove me down from home and stuff. It was super lovely. And then the next year, I did it in Leaf on Portland Street in Manchester. It's like a loose leaf tea cafe. So they had like a function room, and then it's like really cool like space. And we'd sold like 25 tickets on the morning of it. So I was like, no one knows who I was. Like, why have we booked this? It's like quite a big room, and I was like, we booked a cafe's massive room for me. I barely exist as a film. I was like, the arrogance of this is insane, but like, it's a bit of a swing. Like 130 people turned up. Like, it had like 25 pre-sales, and then that jumped to like 50 before like online sales were closed.
That's amazing.
And then like just I don't know, like the students took a wind of it. So it was just like this really rowdy, like standing room only like gig, and I was just kind of it was honestly amazing. It was one of the like best receptions. It was just like there was just a really nice like vibe in the room, and people just seemed quite excited. So I loved that one. That was a great one.
Oh, wicked! That sounds incredible.
Yeah, that was good fun. That was like 5 years ago now. But it was good. I remember it, so it must have been all right. I had a show last year there when we did Rompers, like our hour-long show in Durham, and my mum, who's sadly passed away recently, she came to that, and I kept laughing on stage because there's certain lines in some of the sketches that I specifically love, but never really get a laugh because they're just weird little things that make me laugh. And the only person who's ever really laughed at all of the ones that I like was just my mum. And like, she was just, no one in the audience was laughing, like, except her. And she was like really laughing at these little lines. It was like 4 or 5, which I was like, they're my favourite jokes that don't really get a big laugh. And for some reason, like, me and my mum had like a really different sense of humour, but all my favourite bits like hit with her.
Yeah.
And, I was like, and the show was like fine, it went okay, but I was like, that's a big success. That I was like, we've made mum laugh and made lots
that's lush that resonated with her, because like that must have been really special that those moments were just like the moments that were making you laugh inside. You had someone externally going as well, and
and usually the inside laugh is the only one going on. It's nice to have.
You're like, am I hallucinating? Was someone laughing? Oh, that's wicked.
That's sweet.
I'm going to let Hannah ask our last question, which is one of our favourite ones. Unless you have something to add that I've...
No. I mean, we always round up every interview by asking what is considered to be the most difficult question of all time. What is your favourite book? Feel free to have a crisis before you answer.
Yeah.
A really sick guy called Joe Rogan. I don't know if you've heard now.
Don't let me cancel this.
Yeah. It's The Art of the Deal by Donald J. Trump. He's
oh, God.
very good writer, and he definitely wrote the book
Anyway,
himself.
that's been Brogan, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I've got no more funny fake answers. I really like a big book for me, which is quite bait, was I loved The Call of the Wild by Jack London. I like wrote my dissertation on it and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. I think that's one of the most interesting books I've ever read. I love The Call of the Wild. But I feel that's quite bait. Maybe more so in America than here, but that's quite a bait one. But I loved The True History of the Kelly Gang by Peter Carey. Peter Carey, yeah.
Was my favourite book that I studied at university. I loved that. I think The True History of the Kelly Gang by Peter Carey is my favourite novel.
Nice.
It's very cool. Have you read it?
I have.
Yeah, I was going to say Hannah has. I think I've heard of it.
I studied it at A level. That was a hard sentence to get out. I studied it at A level.
Nice.
With In Cold Blood. It's I always remember there was this really beautiful image on the opening page of her pushing bread through the cracks of the floorboards to get to the prisoners underneath, and I remember just that really sticking with me, that love. She was banned from going to visit them, so she pushed bread through the cracks in the floorboards, and I think about that sometimes.
That's such a you image.
Anyway,
that is so you.
Let's move on.
It's really nice though, because like when we ask these questions, I haven't just with everything in the last few years, I haven't read as much, and because I've been on a lot of strong medication, I don't remember a lot of what I've read, and I feel like I'm coming away with a really fun reading list from everyone. That a lot of the people we've had are people I admire, and enjoying the conversation with, but then I get to kind of go back and be like, oh, that's what Brogan said, or what Faye said, or what Rose said, which is, I mean, Rose's entire reading list was just your dream.
Yeah, it was. To be fair.
You were having a great time.
Why is that your favourite book? Out of pure curiosity.
I don't know. I remember loving that, and I read a lot of. I'm not a huge novel reader at the moment. I don't know why. Just like in the recent years, I just haven't been. But that was. It's always stuck with me. That I loved the form of it, because it's like epistolary. It's like letters to like his daughter, like telling the story of his life. And I don't know. I think I loved it more like in the studying of it as well, because I just found it interesting. Because it's the Tree History of the Kelly Gang, and it's sort of like there's loads of documented history about Ned Kelly.
Yeah.
But there's all these gaps, and then Peter Carey's like filled in all the gaps with like what he's like a historian as well. So it's like all the things that he thinks happened, but then that's also through the lens of like the voice of a very unreliable sort of narrator, like telling you what his view was on like these things that did or didn't happen. So I don't know. I found all of it interesting. I loved it. And Midnight's Children by Salman Rushdie as well. I love Midnight's Children. That is just that one. I think that won the Booker of Booker. So it's quite an obvious thing to say, but it is just maybe the best book.
It's okay. Classics are classics for a reason. We're not gonna hold you to it.
And all my friends' poetry books as well. They're also my favourite books.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good answer.
Yeah, wicked. Well, thank you so much, Brogan. This has been. I mean, we knew you'd give me a good one, so it's been lovely chatting.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's been delightful. I hope we get to see you soon.
Thank you, and also happy baby.
Yes, happy baby to me.
I saw that on Instagram.
Looking at both of us.
Yes, we're having a child together. Sorry, Ben.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Happy baby.
Lovely. What a lovely guy.
Yeah, and we knew he was going to be as well, didn't we?
Yeah.
I think we were so excited to have Brogan on the podcast. When we started gathering our guests right at the beginning of this entire thing, Brogan was on there because we knew he was just going to be a genuinely lovely person.
Yep.
And we're going to be able to just take lots of notes from him.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing about Brogan is, like, it feels very similar to Cullen from last season. Like, we know they've done incredible things, but they're so modest. They're just like, with Cullen, we were like, and what about Glastonbury? He's like, oh yeah, Glastonbury. And like, with Brogan, I was like, what about the Edinburgh Fringe? She was like, oh yeah, the Edinburgh Fringe.
Exactly.
And I'm just like, you've had amazing runs. Like, when I read Brogan's bio at the start of the episode, and I was just like, wow, you said, I didn't know he'd done so much. Like, he's amazing. And then he's just like, oh yeah, I did that. And I'm like, gosh, to be that comfortable with yourself and just like that, like, I don't know, maybe like secure,
nonchalant about your achievements because you do. I don't know. It sounds as though you don't realise to someone else that that's actually very, very impressive.
We were very impressed.
Yeah. I didn't realise that he'd done as much as he had. So it was really interesting to kind of listen to him and just how quickly he seemed to find success as well. By just putting himself out there, by just going and having a go, not really knowing what was going to happen. And how much it's paid off for him.
It absolutely has. I think that's definitely something we should all like take away from this episode, is just like taking a chance and being bold. And yeah, just what a lovely chat. And like, I don't know about you, but I don't write comedy poetry.
No.
I write fast-paced political poetry. And you write, how we, going back to how to describe yours, like, I'd say honest.
Yeah.
Nature versus people.
Yeah, it's definitely not humorous. It's like, sometimes maybe it's sarcastic, but definitely not humorous. Mainly because I've always been scared about the performance side of it.
Which is like, I'm hoping maybe this season will challenge you a little bit more.
Perhaps.
Maybe give you some energy, momentum to go and do it.
I think Brogan had some really nice tips though, which I'll take on, and obviously we'll be setting our kind of not homework, creative tasks for the week.
Yeah.
As inspired by Brogan. Do you want to get going with the first one? What was the first thing that you took?
Yeah, I think for performers, I loved the way Brogan talked about the fact that he has a persona, the fact that he has like a bit of a sort of shield, and he sort of creates a sort of the set around that. And I think one of the things we both thought resonated with us both was don't take yourself so seriously. I think that's something I really need to do is like, I do have quite bad stage anxiety, and I get a bit wobbly and I get a bit freaked out, and it does affect me. And at the end of the day, like, you're just reading poetry. Like, it's still important and it's still special and it's still an art form and you're still sharing an experience. But at the end of the day, you have the ability to not take yourself so seriously and actually give yourself breathing room and humanize yourself. And I loved that. And I think there's a real thing for performers in this season that we want to encourage you to go and perform and find play. Obviously, anyone who can come to Inksville, you are more than welcome. We have, in fact, we recently, I think we mentioned last week, we didn't go viral on Twitter, but someone who came to one of our nights went viral on Twitter. And he talked about how supportive the room was when he came to Inksville for the first time and how that really gave him the confidence to do stuff. And that's what's led to this. And I think that's what I love about Inksville, is that it's really welcoming. So we want people to be brave and to find these communities themselves, and anyone who can come to us, please do. But also, like, take yourself a little less seriously when you're in these moments and you're feeling a bit flustered or a bit frazzled. Yeah. Enjoy it. Choose to enjoy it rather than allowing it to overwhelm you, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, because I think something that really struck me, especially in that conversation, was that Brogan there was completely different to the Brogan that we saw on stage. And that man was screaming on the stage.
We had to do some sound check and move the microphone away.
Because he's just that intense in his performance. But then in actual fact, we're saying it's actually just to talk to, just a regular guy. Like, actually,
just a little guy.
Yeah, just you would never know that he would then get onto stage and then step into this kind of this persona. So I think taking away that embarrassment, because as well, everyone in the audience, no one has attended that event to be horrible, have they? So no one is going to tear you apart. They're there because they enjoy poetry. They want to be entertained, and they want to be supportive. So play into that, be there, be present, and just do your thing. And it can only go well, surely. It can only pay off for you.
Yeah, all of that. So for performers, my sort of creative task is less creative task and more sort of food for thought, and figure out how to kind of take yourself less seriously, and hopefully that will free you to enjoy it more. Yes,
it's going to be quite tricky to take something from this from a page perspective, a print perspective, just because obviously it was very performance based. But there was one thing that he said in particular that I thought was really important, and it was this idea that make sure whatever you're doing has some kind of realism attached to it. So he talked about being a very surreal poet, getting onto that stage and creating these surreal performances. But as surreal as it is, everyone's got something that they can grab to, because there's that element of observation and that element of real life in there. Yeah. So I like the idea of maybe looking at your work and reflecting and thinking to yourself, am I too present in this work? In actual fact, could somebody else hear this and grab onto it themselves, take something from it themselves? Because I think I'm quite guilty of doing that. Sometimes I get so in my own head and in my own persona that and my own experiences, I forget that there's going to be other people listening and reading to it. Can they take something from it too? Can they apply it to their lives too? Is there a deeper message there?
Yeah, definitely.
Than just the one that I've created. So I think that was quite interesting. Maybe just have a little bit of reflection, think to yourself, what is someone going to take from this, and is it what I'd like them to take?
Yeah, all of that. No, that's amazing. I think that's one of the reasons why we want to have like Brogan in, is because I knew he'd offer such like an interesting insight into like how we consider our own work in different areas. So yeah, I think it's good. I hope people at home enjoy those creative tasks.
And please do keep an eye on our socials, because Brogan is going to send us a little snippet of his performance, and he really is not to be missed. And if you get the chance to see his performance live, in one of the slams or open mics that he's at,
or headline slots, he's getting a lot of those now.
Headline slots, I mean, come on, we're dealing with a celeb here.
Well, we'll try and share stuff on socials.
Just get to that performance, because you will not regret it. He was phenomenal last year at Inksville.
He really was. He was a real asset to the festival. That's episode 2, season 3 done.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
We'll be back next week. Should we just mention who's our guest next week?
Yeah, why not? We've got the lovely Rose Kondo with us.
Oh, it's gonna be such a dream. Yeah, Rose is an absolute.
To speak to her.
If the mitochondria is a powerhouse of the cell, Rose Kondo is the mitochondria of the Northern poetry scene.
She absolutely is, and I think she's going to have some real kind of wisdom to share with us, which I am excited to take in.
Just basking.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for joining us.
Yes.
Big thanks to Brogan. We had a fantastic time with him.
Yep.
And we'll see you all next week.
Yeah, we're off to go host our lovely ink spill night.
We
So we
are.
will see you all later.
Lovely stuff.
Bye.
Bye.